Hello. Today we're interviewing Laura and Kara, two parents, and they co-founded an organization together called Less is More, as well as they ran their kids' green team for ever it feels like. They'll tell us how many years, and they also serve on the D97 task force and are helping audit the district and the task force. So, hope you enjoy the show. Hello, Kara and Lauren. Welcome to Little Planet. Can you all just give us a little introduction about yourself and how you both found each other and you've done such cool work. I was looking at your website and you have kids and all that. So can you just give uh, an intro to how you found each other?
Sure. Thanks for having us, Manolo. Karen and I met each other at By Elementary School, which is one of the elementary schools here in Oak Park in District 97. And we met each other like 7 years.
Yeah, 7 years ago.
So we both have fifth graders or recently graduated rising sixth graders. They were at school together. And so Karen and I crossed paths with the school-based PTO Green Team. And we both started our volunteering with the Green Team as lunchroom sorters. So By is one of the schools with the kind of longest history of trying to reach a zero waste lunchroom with different practices, and that includes sending lunch into recycling, landfill, and compost. So there was a group of adult volunteers, family members, parents, guardians that would come in and volunteer during the lunchtime to help direct and support the kids in those efforts. And so Karen and I were able to get a firsthand look at how the By students were learning how to reduce their waste in the lunchroom and hopefully learn those practices to take on back with them at home too.
Wow, that's so cool. And I promise, hopefully, if not, we can do a follow up interview. But there's so much to cover. I want to get to less is more, but first, I want to get to all your amazing work at By. And I think, if I'm remembering this correctly, someone or one of you might have told me, because we both serve on the D97 Sustainability Task Force, and you are co-chairs of the zero waste part of it. At one point, maybe you did throughout your volunteering at By, but you had like 70 kids apply to be on the green team, and you had to cut some back. How did you keep keep the kids so interested, or do you think it was you got to catch them at a young age because they're more curious then?
Well, I think what we saw when we were volunteering in the lunchroom was that, the students really were capable of doing the sorting themselves. And a lot of them, were always volunteering to help. They were eager to kind of take a leadership position. There were always like a handful of kids that were at the ready to jump in and, help direct students and just, and do the work. And so it was really the students themselves that showed us and started asking us, why can't we have a student green team? They wanted to have their own group and club. And so Kara and I kind of heard that, and it made sense because in order to kind of move that program forward so that it was, long term, a practice that was going to be long term in the lunchroom, it seemed best to move away from relying just on adult volunteers, external volunteers to come in and man those lunchroom times, and to transition it to the students to really take ownership and leadership of that process. And so that's where Student Green Team was born, and we were really intentional about how we structured the program. We wanted to make sure that all age groups could participate. We wanted to make sure that there weren't any barriers for participation. So We talked with our principal about making sure that it was offered during the lunchtime hours so that any before or after school issues with transportation or whatever would not be a potential barrier for kids to participate. So it was really a matter of figuring out what our capacity was. We learned fairly quickly that there was a lot of interest. And so with just two of us, we had to, and the space available, we had to kind of cap our participation, which this past year was at 73.
Yeah, we didn't necessarily turn anyone away. We just set a enrollment deadline, a few weeks after we opened the
Yeah.
enrollment. But the good thing is it's open, it's during the school day, so we have sort of a working lunch. And the student green team meets in the school library, and it's during their lunch period. So it's open to kindergarten through fifth grade, and nobody's turned away based on, after school availability. So it really is as inclusive as any school group could get, I think.
And people, I went to buy with, oh, who did I go with? I'm forgetting, but a group. I went to Oak Park and River Forest High School, and they helped pass this climate bill where I had Margaret and Helen on. You can go to that one interview if you want. After this one, though, listen to this one, because it's gonna be good. And they asked some questions I didn't even know, and we posed some questions to them, and they knew the answers like that. So don't underestimate five is 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds. I'm terrible
Yeah,
with ages.
kindergarten up through sixth grade. I
Yeah,
mean, fifth grade.
yeah, that's so cool. Did you all have like an experience like this in your childhood, or were you concerned about it, or like it just happened when you were parents and seeing what was happening in the by lunchroom?
I grew up in the 1980s, so environmental awareness and sustainability was not really on anyone's radar very much, especially not in suburban and urban Chicago schools, as far as my experience. However, there was a lot less waste, I think. I went to two different grade schools, and most kids brought stuff from home. Not everything was individually wrapped like it is today. There was very little single-use plastics. There were no water bottles. There were no reusable or single-use plastic water bottles. Everyone drank out of a water fountain. So just the amount of food waste and single-use plastic waste in elementary through secondary school lunchrooms, I think, has just increased exponentially since I was in school. So I didn't personally have had an experience like that as a child. So it was more about witnessing it, as an adult everywhere, just the problem. And I felt personally like I could make the most impact in the schools. So that's where that started for me.
I I'm was born and raised here in Oak Park, and so I remember when Oak Park launched their residential recycling program with the blue bins, little blue bins. I remember being really fascinated. Don't feel like there was much exposure prior to that, like from my family. The only other place was probably through Girl Scouts, where we talked about like the environment and stuff. So I feel proud that, there's kind of this long history in Oak Park of, being ahead of the curve around some sustainability efforts. And, and now raising my own kids here and seeing that, there's a lot of things in place, but there's still a lot of room for improvement. And to Kara's point, it feels like schools are a really great place to help move some of that forward because, even though we're not a super huge community, Oak Park, we are a good size. And the schools, 10 schools in District 97 make up a fairly large, institutional presence in the village. And so if we can, get some sustainability practices, going really strong in the schools and helping to teach things, both with the students, hopefully eventually in the classroom too, that will have larger impacts both at the family and at the community level to keep, Perk moving forward.
Yeah, talk about that. And I know less is more. You all both co-founded it, and it serves, or you serve school and businesses, correct? And I think I heard you at one of our committee meetings, or no, it was another meeting we were both at. You said that D97 wanted you to like look at all the waste throughout all the schools. So like, what's less is more, and what projects are you working on?
This is more is our green consulting business. This was born out of our interest and our efforts with reducing food waste and single-use plastic waste at By Elementary and the programs we put into place there. Not only with the sorting of compost and recycling, but also with food recovery and being able to donate food to the community that's unopened, unused, and perfectly, good food instead of it going into the landfill like it had previously been. We started collecting it for distribution to initially local food pantries, and then eventually we partnered with an organization in the Austin neighborhood. They serve 125 people lunch per day that are in need of food. And so part of what we take from By is used to help feed those people daily, which has been great. So we had been asked by other communities, other schools, other PTOs, other administrations, if they could kind of come in for a demo on what we've been doing and have a Q&A with them, answer questions about how they might get a similar program started at their own school or their own school district. And so there, we noticed a real need for advice and sort of hands-on, boots on the ground implementation and of a program, and cultivated per school per district. So that's how Less is More was generated, and we did contract with Planet Green, and they sponsored our work for an initial data collection in D97. So there's 10 schools in District 97 in Oak Park. And we did, over the course of about a month, visit all 10 schools just to see what their monthly practices were. Do they do offer versus serve? Do they have sorting stations? How much is being composted? Is anyone manning those stations? How much of an impact does that play? The intention would be to eventually come up with a standardized set of practices so that each school has that to go off of instead of operating in a bubble or a vacuum.
That's so cool. Yeah, talk about some of the things that you suggest. I know I love the idea of offer versus serve because I remember I went to Lincoln from K through third grade, and they would just serve you a big plate, and I would not eat the fruits and vegetables because I did not like them, but now I do. So what would happen to that, and like how much, do you know how much waste is, things are just thrown in the trash in lunchrooms?
So it's such a good question. So what we saw is across the schools is that there is an awareness of what offer versus serve is with like lunchroom staff. And it just looked differently in terms of how it was being practiced from school to school. So, and for anyone that's listening, offer versus serve is the USDA and the National School Lunch Programs policy procedure where students are required to take 3 of the 5 items, and of those 3, one needs to be a fruit or a vegetable. And so the idea is to allow kids the choice to choose what items they want, which 3 items, but they can choose all 5 if they like. And so that idea would be, to your point, Manila, the kids aren't being served things that they know they don't like or they won't eat, so that we can reduce the food waste on the front end. So again, it's great that there's an awareness that it exists and that it's an allowed practice, but it just it differed from school to school. So, some schools were, plating a good number of the items. Some schools were under the understanding that milk was a required item that all students needed to take, or they were not clear that that was something that could be a choice. There was some differences in terms of understanding that the opportunity for students to come back for seconds was an option, which I guess is different from offer versus serve, but it really allowed us to get an understanding that there's more need for clear guidance around how offer versus serve should be used in each lunchroom across the schools, and just clarifying what that looks like, and supporting the staff and being able to make that transition through training and support, because there really is a great deal of food that was going to waste. There are a few schools that are using share tables. That's also an area that we're making recommendations for a standard operating procedure, and for there to be some clarification on expectations and permissions around that for the district. So a few schools have a share table where if a student is served, for instance, like a fruit or vegetable, to your point, Manil, that they don't want, maybe it's a bag of carrots or a single apple, they can put that on the share table if they haven't eaten it or opened the package. And then based on each individual school at this point, they have directives of whether kids can come and take from the share table, or if the items are just being collected, and then will either be used for snacks at the larger school level, or some maybe be donating them in the case that BI is doing. And then there are some schools that aren't doing a share table at all. So all of that food is just going into the landfill, or at best into the compost. So until there's both clearer direction and expectation around offer versus serve and how that's practiced in every lunchroom, there should definitely be a move to get a share table, even if the share table is just to collect the food for donation outside of the school. And I say that because there's a lot of concern around food allergies, which are very legitimate concerns. Food allergies being, one of the reasons why schools are hesitant to allow students to come and take from the share table. But there is a large excess of good food that is currently going to waste. And so regardless of a share table that would be used within the school, they can still collect the food, like a food recovery program, and donate it externally. But simultaneously, both of those ideally would happen together, both an offer versus serve as well as a share table and food recovery program together being established and implemented as kind of expectations and standard operating procedures. That would be best case scenario.
That's so cool. Yeah. Share tables, I just find amazing. Was the share table? I know BI had one. Was it like always full to the brim, or like half full? Was there a lot of participation? Students didn't want to eat their carrots.
Yeah, for as many students that don't want fruits and vegetables, it's not across the board. So including a BI for schools that we have seen that have a share table, there are just as many kids, I think, coming up and taking fruits and vegetables that are left over. Some are definitely more popular than others, and that's another point of important data that we gathered just from visiting these 10 schools, is that is some consistency in what kids don't like. For example, bagged celery or bagged cherry tomatoes. But as far as apples and oranges, carrots, um, there are plenty of kids coming up that are still hungry and take those from the share tables from the schools that we've seen. It's more of a donation table, but it is the recommendation of the Illinois School Board of Education that share tables be allowed. So it's not, and there is plenty of documentation, liability releases, things like that to encourage schools to offer these share tables. And anecdotally from the schools that we've talked to and the administration and teachers that we've talked to at the schools that offer share tables, the food, there's very little to donate after the kids get a chance to take from it. So it's kind of a myth that, all the kids don't like the fruits and vegetables and they'll only take the other items. So.
Yes, I apologize. um, uh, 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 what is it sort of the same thing? I saw on your website you offer services for schools and businesses. Is sort of like the concept the same for businesses? And like, have you worked with any businesses so far?
Yeah, we're developing some workshops for a few businesses right now on reducing food waste and single-use plastic waste for their lunches. I think there's a big move after the pandemic to try to lure people that had been working remotely back into the office, and part of that is ordering these elaborate lunches for the office. But they always come with these single-use utensils automatically if you're ordering in from Grubhub or from restaurants directly. A lot of businesses don't have composting programs at all, so we're in the same way developing workshops.
And it's exciting to hear more and more, businesses are moving towards like sustainability missions, that they want to go green or, whatever, term they use. And, you know, similar to schools, they don't really know like where to start, or they're not really sure what a first step might be. So we're happy, to go in and be able to kind of assess like what they have going on, and be able to offer some recommendations and maybe link them with certain resources or other services. Like for instance, there's a business that we're talking to who have recently launched composting in their lunchroom common space through a contract with WasteNot, and they're really excited about that. But there hasn't been enough training, maybe, or like check in with the staff to really get the program off the ground. So it's really, still a lot of contaminated compost, and they really want to be all in on this effort. And so they're looking for some advice and some insight from us as to really help explain, kind of like demystify like what compost is, why it's important, the do's and don'ts, and really help support them in that effort to specifically reduce their food waste in their lunchroom setting.
Yeah. Um. So I I know you all from. I wasn't a tiny little fifth grader at the meetings, but when I went, and from what I saw from behind the scenes, from you both co-leading the Bike Green team, you all did a massive lot and accomplished a lot. So kudos to you. But that must be like take time away from other things. So what's your thoughts on administration taking or like assigning a teacher to do each club at each school? Because I know at let me know if this is incorrect, but there no longer is a Buy Green team because your children have departed and are going into middle school.
Lauren and I are moving on from Vi because our kids are moving on into middle school. But the Vi Green Team, we're in hopes that it'll live on starting next year and continue on. We've had interest from a few parents who've talked to us about taking over the Student Green Team. It's our hope that each school in D97, including Vi, would assign a staff member, like a staff liaison, to head both the student green team and the sorting efforts in the lunchroom, similar to like a lunchroom monitor, how, different teachers take on that stipend position, or how different teachers take on, student leadership or student council, and their stipend for that effort. We were hoping that schools will offer stipend positions for both those roles so that they do carry on regardless of who's rolling on and off the PTO. So it'd be nice to have various parents support and help out in those efforts, but to have that continuity from year to year, our recommendation is for there to be a staff liaison heading both those roles.
Yeah, I totally agree. Because parents already do a lot. Well, teachers already do a lot too, and administration. Maybe this whole world just does a lot, but it should be an assigned task. I think a permanent task. Um, Also, one question I just started asking all my guests um, was, why do you think climate education is so important? Because it's so intersected to everything, even um, composting and landfill. Um, you gotta educate. You just can't throw things in the compost, even though people might think you can. It won't get composted. I'm not making sense, but why do you think it's important?
I think it's important because I think it's the most important because it teaches students that we're all part of the same fabric and we're all connected. And if you start with that base, it kind of reduces the lines between people altogether. So if you feel like you're part of a larger effort, you're part of a larger mission, it helps you feel less alone, and that's something that can be really helpful as we become more isolated with technology. And I think for young students especially, teaching them about climate change and climate science and their role in preventing climate change and what they can do. It just gives them such a sense of advocacy and autonomy and agency that they might not get in other areas of their life. And they can be so important in making these changes and spreading the word and educating their parents and families and neighbors and community. And then that reduces their anxiety over climate change. So that for me personally is why I think it's important.
Hmm. Like I said, I do really think it offers it if I think sometimes there's some hesitancy from naysayers around climate education that they're afraid that it's going to like create greater fear or anxiety with kids because you're providing them more information to understand the issues. But I think it's actually, in fact, providing them with, like to Kara's point, like being a part of the solution and understanding that they can have impact, and being a part of a larger collective and community who's committed to making those changes to see the improvements that we want to see in our world. And so I think instilling that sense of hope and connectedness, and just helping them to see that there are small actions that they can take that collectively can make a big impact. And there's a lot of opportunity for that. For instance, we used to have something called Waste-Free Wednesdays in the lunchroom. And it was, one day a month that the students would be encouraged to bring a zero waste lunch. I mean, they were encouraged all the time, but especially to try to get like every lunch to be zero waste. And there would be like, prizes and things to reward students who did that. However, it didn't really like there wasn't a consideration that for students that were getting school lunch, they had no control over, what was being offered in school lunch. And also really there's not that much control for a lot of students in what they're getting from home lunch either, so um, we can't make the assumption that like every student has, access to like, reusable containers or, reusable lunch bags or whatever it might be. So instead of rewarding kids who brought it, everyone was certainly, we celebrated, we saw that there was zero waste, lunch boxes and things like that. But we also wanted to just like take the opportunity to raise awareness about what you can do as a student and as a kid to make good choices for yourself when you don't necessarily have the buying power or decision making in your house. Um, just like raising awareness, teaching kids about it, and then celebrating just being a part of learning, facts. And, they'd be able to, if you gave them like a little trivia about, which one of these items are like infinitely recyclable, and it would be, like a yogurt cup of, a pop can and, a Ziploc bag, like, when they get excited because they know that aluminum is infinitely recyclable and they could tell you that, like, that's really exciting. So they might not be able to buy the aluminum cans at home, but they know that when they are able to make that decision, they know which option, they may choose based on like these tidbits of information they were getting. So sorry, I didn't mean to go off on that tangent, but I think there's ways to help kids see like even, in the decision making that they have is somewhat limited as being kids. They can still, there are still choices they can make and impact that they can have.
Yeah, that's so great what you both said. How can people, if they want to seek your advice or just follow along your journey, contact or get involved with Less is More or any other venture you all are doing?
It's lessismoregreenconsulting.com. And that has a way to contact us on there. We'll get a notification. That would be the best, most direct way.
Nice, cool. Yeah, and I'll put that their wonderful website with so many facts. It's jaw dropping. I was crying last night. Um, but good crying. It's not bad crying, guys. It's not gonna make you bad cry. Um, any last words or anything else either of you want to share?
So we really appreciate you having us on, and thank you for all the good work you do, Manolo. Our paths cross a lot in the community with the different environmental groups and initiatives, and I think you've been a real inspiration, especially to a lot of our Student Green Team members after you had the chance to visit. And I've seen, you work with the current high school students, even though you've moved on from high school. So we're really glad to be in community with you.
Well, yes, I'm glad to be in community with you too. And thank you both for coming on. And yes, just thank you and have a great weekday. What? I'm losing track of days. It's the start of the week. It's Monday.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Manolo.
Thank you.